Hello there, and welcome along to Season 2 and Episode 8 of the Gardenerben podcast. Well, here in the UK over the last 14 days, we have been treated to some absolutely glorious weather, with temperatures outside soaring to around 16 to 19 degrees over the last few days, really making it feel that spring has arrived. The garden has really been waking up, but under gas, it's been causing us a few problems. With the vents shut on the greenhouse, temperatures have soared to almost 30 degrees, meaning that things are really pushing on a little bit too quickly. Over the last few days, I've been sharing media across multimedia channels about how we need to keep an eye on the watering, as it now hasn't rained for around 10 days, which means if you've been planting bare root roses and continue to receive stock over the next few weeks, you really do need to make sure that you're watering these plants incredibly well, especially over the first 6 to 12 months in the ground. Bare root roses are supplied without any pot or any soil, and as they start to leaf up, will need lots and lots of moisture. On social media, I've been talking my followers through how to actually water deeply, and this involves watering with around 1 to 2 gallons of water around once or twice a week from now until the end of the season. This encourages the plants to plunge their roots deep down into the soil structure and head into the subsoil looking for water. Roses are notoriously deep-rooted, and if you water them little and often with just a couple of litres of water at a time, you'll make a very lazy plant, and it will naturally keep its roots close to the soil surface and make it susceptible to drought and dry conditions in the future. So you must make sure that you water with at least 1 whole watering can of water around once or twice a week, placing the water directly onto the soil in the root zone around the bottom of the plant, and wherever possible keeping the foliage dry. Rising temperatures under glass means that you're also going to have to pay close attention to any seedlings or young plants you're growing on in the greenhouse, on your windowsills or out in your cold frames. A really good thing to bear in mind here, and a great working practice, is to make sure that you bring any water that you want to use to water your young plants into the greenhouse, porch or into the garage just to warm it up slightly for around 12 to 24 hours before you use it. Dousing young plants in stone cold water straight from the water butt, or if you have to, drawing it straight from the tap, can actually put young plants into shock. Let's face it, not many of us will enjoy a stone cold shower just as soon as the duvet is pulled back early in the morning. So you must make sure that if you're using tap water or water straight from the water butt, you warm it ever so slightly before you use it. Allowing tap water to stand for around 24 hours will also allow any chlorine to actually evaporate from the water as well, making it much more palatable for your young plants and seedlings. My inbox on social media once again has been flooded with concerned rose growers across the entire world. As the roses start to wake up, inexperienced growers and people with new varieties are often quite astonished by the different types of foliage, colours, shapes and sizes, including textures that your roses will actually produce. And my inbox at this time of year every year is absolutely full with people very concerned they have some nasty rose disease, especially on plants they've newly purchased. I've reshared as a result my rose identification video to Instagram, YouTube and on TikTok. In it, I have laid out on my dining table around 30 different roses, mostly from David Austin, which all show very different foliage types at this time of year. And it's very natural for them to produce foliage that's bright scarlet red, bronzed, olive green, and sometimes tinged with pink and peachy tones as they start to wake up and send out new growth. Now, as we head towards the beginning of April, it is the perfect time to start thinking about feeding your roses. Gardeners like me, who are relying very heavily on their organic mulches, have already applied them around the base of the plants and wherever possible across most of their gardens. However, if you're going to be using a pelleted or slow release fertiliser, now in the beginning of April is the perfect time to apply it. These pelleted fertilisers are often activated by a combination of temperature and moisture levels. So now as we head towards the month of April, it's the perfect time to get out and spread them around the base of your roses or into ones that you're growing in pots. Likely fork them into the soil, and if you haven't had rain within around 5 to 7 days after application, consider just popping a fine watering can rose onto a watering can and give them a good douse to get them activated. This will ensure your plants have all the nutritional value they need as they start to leaf up and prepare themselves for the first flush of flowers, which will be due in around 4 to 6 weeks' time. That brings us very nicely to this week's guest. This week we're heading back across the Atlantic Sea where I get to talk to Justin, who's involved with the Tacoma Rose Society in Washington State. Washington State's oldest Rose Society, founded in 1911. Well, today I'm really exciting to be welcoming Justin from the Tacoma Rose Society in Washington State to the podcast. Justin, hi, how are you?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for calling me and for including me this morning. How are
It's a
things going on your side?
Do you know what? Finally, winter seems to have broken. The sun is shining. It is gloriously sunny. I've got the joys of spring in my step, so everything is good here. How is things with you? I really feel like I need to check in with all of my American guests just to see how they're faring because it's a bit of a crazy time you're living in at the moment, isn't it?
It's a great time for spring to finally be coming and to get a break from the real world and just distract myself in the garden because there's new news every day. So
It's
trying to stay informed, but just escaping out to the flowers wherever we can, and spring is finally starting to break.
much like one of your posts you had over the weekend. It's simply raining poop, isn't it?
Indeed, yeah.
So tell us a little bit for those that don't know the a society that you're part of was founded in 1911. You're in Washington State. So tell us all about what goes on with the Rose Society.
Yeah, so we are in the northwest corner of the US. Thankfully, there are a number of rose societies in our major metropolitan area, which isn't necessarily the case for a lot of the US. And we don't manage, but we help take care of a local municipal garden that's the Tacoma Rose Garden. And it's in this gorgeous urban park that's been preserved for over 100 years. And so we've got about 1,500, depending on who you ask and when you ask, roses there that we prune every spring and deadhead every week throughout the growing season. That's absolutely gorgeous. So that's our most visible project.
Hmm.
But we also have meetings every month that we're not deadheading. We have a rose show that is pretty decently attended every year in June. So that's generally our society's big focus for the year. But then we also have a couple rose sales, rose auction, and it's just a great chance for people to get together, ideally at least once a month, to chat about their roses, chat about their gardens, see some friends, and just be connected through something that everyone's interested in and is generally a happy thing until we're talking about black spot and aphids that aren't due for another couple months.
I must admit, I am so very, very jealous of you guys over in America with this particular part of your community. I was lucky enough last year to travel. Was it last? No, it was actually 2023 to come across, and I spoke to the New England Rose Society just outside Boston. I was very, very grateful to be invited there, and the sense of community and the sense of camaraderie and well, basically community of people getting together, like-minded people, and we were really worried attending that because we thought, oh, goodness me, we're not quite sure what kind of people we're going to encounter. But everybody was there for the same reason, a really active Rose Society with a spectrum of members from all walks of life, from all religious backgrounds, for all heritage backgrounds, all coming together because their love of roses. And we were made so welcome. And I'm so very jealous of it because over here in the UK, I mean, we have very traditional. Societies, the RHS and the HTA, but nothing really very. And I'm not saying it's not friendly, but it's all very heavy. It's very old fashioned. It's very difficult to get into. So I'm really, really very jealous of the fact that there seems to be sort of a huge community over there of people that are growing together and get together regularly and meet and talk and exchange ideas and have these potluck dinners and all these wonderful things. So I'm very jealous indeed.
No, and that's exactly it. I mean, I count myself extremely lucky to have found them, but we have So our group was founded in 1911, and we have people who are in their 30s and 40s, and then we also have people who have been in the group for 40 or 50 years.
Hmm.
There's a really good mix of people around for that, and I'm grateful to have found them. We're affiliated with the American Rose Society, which is a more institutional organization. They have
I'm
a
familiar.
publication that they put out a few times a year,
I've met their
and
president.
so that helps corral us all. Yeah, no, it's a fantastic group, and so I'm grateful to have found it.
Okay. And may I ask, what do you garden for a day job, or do you do something else during your Monday 9 till 5?
So my husband is an estate planning attorney, and one of the big life changes, along with many other life changes during COVID, is I left my job in internal audit consulting, which was just as joyful as it sounds, and came to run his office during COVID. So that's given us a lot more flexibility. It's allowed us to, get a lot closer to building the actual life that we wanted to build and live. And so that gives me a lot more time to do things like volunteering with the Rose Society, working in my own gardens. We completely redid our backyard during COVID.
Hmm.
So I do not make any money from anything plant related, but it brings me joy. So that's worth something too.
I believe that's the biggest thing that anybody can ever chase in life. If it makes you happy, if it makes you smile, carve out the time and spend whatever you need to do on it.
No, and that's exactly it. So it's just about finding friends. Think, in my opinion, we've got a beautiful backyard, so we love having folks over during the summer on that. We are firmly in suburbia in the States, so we're just a few minutes from three different freeways. So it's really easy to get to our home from wherever you're getting to. So it's just finding opportunities to enjoy it and share it with other folks.
Lovely, lovely. And tell us a little bit about your garden. It's predominantly raised beds. Is that correct from what I'm seeing online?
Yes. So where we live is all glacial till clay from millions of years ago. The glaciers came through, took out all of the good soil from where we live and moved it to other wonderful places. So in my backyard, I have broken three shovels and a pickaxe. And when I broke the pickaxe trying to get the rocks out of the clay is when we decided, you know what, we're just going to build up, and so we have a few raised beds of roses. We've got a deck that's got pots on it. We've got a side patio that has some planters that I've got other flowers for cutting in. But we have very little in the ground because I just can't get to it.
So you're in control of your soil conditions and your amendments, and you can control your growing environment a little better.
Exactly.
And what kind of rose is it that you're growing? What's your favorite rose to grow in the garden?
So the one that performs the best and just brings the biggest smile is probably Julia Child, Floribunda. And I mean, she's just got this gorgeous buttery yellow color. We've got two
It can't
bushes
it
on
can't
either
possibly be
side of the row of raised beds.
it can't possibly be the color of butter.
No, I know, shocking, right? Why on earth would she pick that?
I
But
don't suppose
that's probably my best performer.
I don't suppose you've watched the recent series about Julia Childs called Julia, starring a
I
UK
haven't seen
actress.
that yet.
It's starring an actress called Sarah Lancashire, and it is adorably cute. The relationship between her and her husband. If you ever catch the time and want to watch something British produced, have a watch of that because it's simply divine. It's just so wonderful to watch. And don't watch it hungry because you will eat absolutely everything you can possibly find covered in butter afterwards. But yeah, it's really interesting. Julia Childs. Yeah, so you're growing that as a shrub rose or a climber?
So I'm growing that as a shrub.
Hmm.
So pretty much everything in our garden is grown as a shrub, and they're grown as garden roses, and then also four cut roses. I'll take them to a show, though they're not really blue ribbon winners, but they bring me joy at my home.
I don't think they have to be ribbon winners to bring you smiles. So again, I think that was the nice thing about seeing the Rose Society they went to visit, that they actually brought lots of blooms with them to exhibit, and it was a whole different spectrum of different rose growers and types, everything from floribundas to hybrid teas to modern classics. It was just lovely to see everything sort of mixed together and everybody enjoying the the subject matter all together. So a rose that I'm aware of does very, very well with you guys is called Coco Loco. Have you come across that one?
I have one in a pot in my backyard, and sadly, where it is, we put some shades up because we just have complete sun throughout the day in our backyard. And so it catches some shade from that. So I'm going to have to move the pot this year, but it's just a gorgeous, dusty, antique color that I love. So
Yeah.
I would love for that to thrive a little more than it does.
Well, it's actually that rose has become a commented thing on all of my social media pages. That particular rose is going to go through my review process this year. I've got about 50 to 60 roses in the ground already for 2025. So yeah, Coco Loco is going to be one of those ones for my American audience mainly, because I they keep asking me to get in front of it. So I've managed to find it here in the UK, and I'll be reviewing that one for you this year.
I'm curious to know what your thoughts are because your climate is pretty similar to ours. So I'm excited to see how that grows.
Yeah, I think very similar sort of daytime and summer temperatures. Anywhere from summertime, we're looking at sort of 20 to 30 degrees Celsius. During the winter, I think your winters are much harsher than ours. I mean, I was not moaning this morning, but I did mention on a post that it was particularly cold for us this morning. It was -3 Celsius today, which for us is cold. I'm aware that you get temperatures much, much lower than where you are growing.
So thankfully, where I live specifically, we're just a couple miles from a large body of water. It's the Salish Sea or the Puget Sound. So we're pretty well insulated. We'll just get a couple of weeks in the teens. So I think that's around -5 for
Hmm.
you.
Yeah.
So we'll just get a couple of weeks of that. But aside from that, our roses don't. I mean, I know modern roses don't, but our roses don't go dormant. We've got a thriving culture of moss in the area, and it just continues on through the winter because it doesn't actually get dormant or too harsh where we are.
And do you experience snow regularly as well?
We'll get a couple in with the changing climate, it's been different over the last few years than it was 10 years ago by far. But we'll get one or two storms where we'll get a few inches of snow, but then they're usually gone in a couple of days. The biggest problem is then it melts during the day and then freezes over at night and just turns into a sheet of ice. So that
Yeah.
takes a few days to go away. But no big snowstorms, nothing like over in New England where they have just massive snow drifts through the season.
Yeah, well, I must admit, you're probably aware that we've been looking at moving over to the New England states, and yeah, placing ourselves within the growing zone map has become quite difficult. Obviously, at the moment, we're not planning to make that move. I'm quite grateful that we haven't managed to make that move, but it was something that we have to really consider as we've been looking at properties. I always thought we'd end up in Vermont, just because of the romance of. Are you familiar with the Diane Keating film, The Baby Boom?
Yes.
Yeah, that film made me fall in love with Vermont and want me to what literally my husband looked at me one day about 18 months ago, and I was beavering away on my phone. We were watching this film and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Fancy moving to Vermont." And I was looking at sort of Vermont estates for cashing our little house in over here, and sort of buying, I don't know, 20 acres in Vermont with a barn and and never having to work again. I thought, oh, this could be quite a nice dream. But yeah, I'm quite glad that it hasn't happened as of yet, because I think we might be coming home quite quickly if it had happened already.
Yeah, I'd been thinking about you lately with because we talked a couple of years ago about you looking to move over here. So I mean, I would love to have you closer, but I'm glad you haven't done it yet.
Yeah,
But
we're
no, that
seriously
sounds absolutely romantic.
we're seriously considering at the moment Scotland or Wales. So staying within the UK. I mean, we haven't been successful selling our house, which is obviously the big crux of things. The property market here in the UK, think globally the property market is very flat anyway. There's not a lot of buyer confidence anywhere in the developed countries at the moment. But yeah, as soon as the house comes back to the market and we sell, we'll so we're looking at France, we're looking at Spain, but I think it's probably going to be Scotland or Wales within the UK. Because I said we just need a little bit of space. I laid the last paving slab on the patio here and put the finishing touches to our full renovation. It took me best part of 6 years to renovate this tiny little house. And I laid the last paving slab and built the terrace, and then I knew it wasn't going to be enough. And I thought, well, I better get on with the next one before I get too old, because I'm heading for my mid 40s, and I thought I better crack on with the next one before I get too tired.
That's fair, but you've created something beautiful. I love following along and just seeing all of the tours and where everything is there.
Thank you. It's very kind. I mean, people often think it's a lot bigger than it is, but it's nice to give the tours on YouTube, especially because it gives everybody a little bit of an orientation about which way it sits. And we're really lucky. Our little thatched cottage, as you've probably already aware, it dates back to 1699, the original parts of our house. So it's very, very old indeed, and it sits right in the middle of our garden with a garden all wrapped all the way around it. So I get to see garden absolutely everywhere I go, which is just lovely.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we have nothing like that in the suburbs where I am.
Yeah, when we were looking at we have looked at properties. Yeah, finding something maybe 150 years old was quite strange and quite weird. But there are several old houses that we've looked at. Are you still there?
Sorry about that. My mic cut out, I think.
It's okay.
No, I it's definitely interesting to see. I mean, our house, we've been here for I think 13 years, and we were the ones who had it built in the neighborhood. And then the old houses around where we are about 100 years old.
Hmm.
And some of them still have a little bit of property, but everything's just been divided up. And so it's definitely a lot more packed in than in your area. But that makes for a lot of neighbors and it makes it easy to get around, which is nice.
Yeah. So how many members does the Rose
And then in
Society? How many Rose members does the Rose Society have? How many people are you getting regularly turn up to your monthly meetings?
So we'll probably have around 30 or 40 regularly show up. I think we've got somewhere around 70 or 80 actual members who
Hmm.
get our newsletter every month. And so it's just dependent on how the timing of the week works for everyone. But we've got a well-connected group, and there's a Rose Society in Seattle nearby. There's a Heritage Rose Society that's more regional, that's focused on old garden roses and vintage varieties. But then we also have friends at a very large one down in Portland that has been around for ages, and then Vancouver, Washington, which is just north of them across the river. And so we get a lot of cross pollination between all of these groups.
That must be
And
a
so
really
it's
lovely wealth of information for you all to share when you get together as well.
I mean, that's the reason that we initially started coming, was just to start trying to find out how we had 5 roses at the time, and now we're just under, maybe just over about 70 rose bushes at our house.
Wow, it's quite a lot.
And our first 5 roses, it's just at the edge of what's manageable. So I probably won't do too many more, but
You're
we have a rose sale in a couple weeks, so I may walk home with a couple from
you-
that
you're
and
you're
have
stare
to
you're
find a
st
place to pop them.
staring down the barrel of into the abyss and thinking, oh, if I take an extra step, I'm gonna be in trouble.
Right, exactly. I mean, there is truly nowhere for them to go if I bring in too many extras.
Have you seen
But
what I've been?
our first 5 roses weren't thriving, so we found the group to try and find actual good information for how to grow them, as opposed to just doing a Google search and being subject to the horrors of whatever people happen to post on a random forum.
And I'm going to have to ask, what were the five gateway roses? Can you remember which ones they were that you started with?
Yes, we still have three of them, and they're much happier than they ever were. So we have two Olympiad roses,
Yeah.
which are a beautiful red rose from the 80s.
Right,
We
that's funny.
have
You should
Pope
mention
John
that one
Paul
because
II.
Olympiad was one of the roses that Jeff the Rose Dude mentioned as well. He does very well with that one.
It does really well in our area, and since you're talking about him, I think it's pretty good for breeding programs, though
Hmm.
I do nothing with that. But it's a beautiful rose. It's not necessarily fragrant, at least not to me, but I can't necessarily smell them all that well anyway. But it's just a beautiful standard looking red rose, just the classic shape to it. And then we had the Pope John Paul II, which is highly fragrant, a beautiful white hybrid tea. And then we had two John F. Kennedy roses, which are absolutely stunning, but they don't do well in our rainy climate. They don't open up. So
What?
anyone who grows them
So
eventually gets rid of them.
they ball up, or they actually sort of the blooms rot.
They rot.
Oh, so
They
that's
rot
not
and just
particularly
look terrible.
attractive.
So you'll get one or two nice bushes, but it's a fantastic rose if you live in California or somewhere a little warmer and drier than what we have.
Yeah. It's funny. One of the largest things I get from, especially on YouTube, obviously, because there's no real control about where the media actually ends up. I get people messaging me from India. I get people messaging me from Arizona and Phoenix and really, really hot places in Mexico. And said, "Oh, you say the blooms get to sort of 3 inches or sort of 7.5, 8 centimeters in diameter, but the blooms on mine they're only the size of a dollar. And why is that?" And it's like, well, again, these most of the roses that I'm talking about are English roses. They've been bred very specifically for our English climate. So when you do manage to get hold of them in other places, and especially when it's particularly warm, it's amazing that they actually manage to flower, let alone actually produce a flower that's anywhere near the size of what you'd expect them to be.
Right? And I mean, India has just an incredible culture of growing roses in pots that I still can't fathom how they get that many blooms
I
for a
think I
rose in
could.
just a tiny pot.
I think I could make an absolute fortune if I could get an import license to send roses to India because I'm asked probably about 12 times a day if I can sell roses to India. So I'm obviously missing a quite a large business opportunity.
I mean, if no one's doing it, that that could be the great thing to start. I have no clue what the import export license looks like. It sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, I guess I was going to say I don't think I have the energy to get involved with it. I mean, sending things to the estate to the states is difficult enough. You're the border control for the United States for biomatter is really really complicated. I was talking to a dahlia grower just last week actually, who's on the podcast in a week or two's time, and he was saying that it's almost impossible to get dahlia tubers through customs, so people have to sort of shove them down their underpants and put them in their pockets.
You know, I can't say who it was, but I've heard someone has a great collection of sweet peas that they found from over in your neck of the woods that aren't necessarily in commerce, and it's always scary for them to try and figure out how they're going to get them here.
Well, I'm a huge sweet pea fan, so I'm not going to say I condone that behaviour, but I do grow an awful lot of sweet peas. I've got what I call my big five. My big five starts in the beginning of the year with bearded irises. They normally start flowering about May time. Then it's the peonies. I'm a huge fan of the peonies. Then it's obviously roses and sweet peas. And then the last one is dahlias. Those are the five things that really captivate my attention. So apart from growing roses in your garden, Justin, what else have you got? You mentioned you had some areas in the garden that you grow cut flowers or flowers to cut for the house. What are you growing in those areas?
Yeah, and it's just stuff that I'm growing mostly from seeds. Floret had a great, so massive. They're actually not a massive operation, but they have a massive online presence. They started a breeding program a few years back and they released a number of seeds last year that just went off like crazy. So I got some dahlias from them that are absolutely beautiful open center dahlias that
Hmm.
I love, but the pollen will just drip like crazy if you put it on anything. But the bees love it, so I'm happy to keep that there. And then we'll have some celosia. I like sunflowers. I don't think I'm going to do any of those this year. And then I've just got some larkspur growing, some salvia, just a mixed bag of stuff. I keep telling myself that I'm going to learn how to properly arrange things, but we'll see if I actually get around to it.
Oh, I actually trained as a florist as part of my horticultural degree. It was a segment I did there, but to be honest with you, I like free forming things and mixing things up and breaking all the rules.
I'm perfectly content to just bring in a couple stems into the house and stick them in a single vase and look at them like they're pretty and then check them out once they start to fade.
I think people find it really strange because they say that, like, obviously I have over 300 roses in the garden now, and actually it's probably more like 350 because I've added 50 varieties this year for review. But people say, well, you must be picking vast quantities of roses, and you must have roses everywhere in the house and in your guest bedroom, and when you entertain, they must be on the table. And I can't actually bring myself to cut roses from the garden and bring them in. I really have to make myself do that occasionally if we're maybe eating outside in a summer's evening, I might cut a dozen or so blooms. But that's why I grow dahlias. I'm not so emotionally attached to dahlias. I grow them as a physical crop. So I cut several hundred stems every week. That's why I grow sweet peas as well. Cut several hundred stems of those a week during the summer months. And those are the ones I bring into the house and those are the ones I gift to people. But I can't actually bear to cut my roses, which is really strange because there is more than enough of them. I just can't do it.
Well, and they look so great on the bush. I mean, that's no, I fully understand. That's my problem too. I'll tend to cut them once they're a little past their peak, so their base life isn't nearly what it should be if I cut them at the proper time. But it makes them pretty. I get to enjoy them a little bit closer, and it's good enough. I'll cut them before a rainstorm, but that's generally the only time that I actually try to bring stuff in.
Yeah, there's a couple of David Austin varieties, for instance, the Princess Alexandra of Kent, which produces flowers about 5 to 5.5 inches across. And if we are expecting a summer rainstorm, it's not worth leaving them outside. They actually end up breaking the bush. So I do go outside just before it rains and cut those and bring those in.
I love that. No, I mean we have some incredible arrangers in our group in our area who I've been hounding. They've offered to help, and I've been hounding them to try and find a date for it. We just haven't yet because life comes in the way. But they know how to create all of these beautiful things, and I want to do it, but I don't know if I have the energy to mess around with all of that.
You're probably aware that I've started tinkering with pressing flowers. I don't know if you've seen any of that on my
Yes.
social media channels, but yeah, it's been a really nice. I'm actually sat. It sounds silly. I'm sat looking at some very limp hellebores that I'm pressing for a client who lost a dear friend just before Christmas, and the friend that passed away. Her favourite flower was the hellebore, which of course over in the UK at the moment are the Christmas rose is flowering very, very well at the moment. And I've got about 15 limp stems in front of me that as soon as I finish my call with you, I've got to open up the flower press and get into the press because I promised her as a way of remembering her friend and her favourite flower, I'd press these flowers for her. So that's been a nice thing to get back into and actually just sort of be a bit more mindful and quiet in my mind. So you might find that flower arranging might be one of those things that you sort of become very peaceful and very zen whilst doing and really enjoy it.
Well, I know we could use it. I mean, anything in this time just as a distraction, as something quiet to enjoy sounds perfect. And that's so sweet. I love that.
Well, I was very lucky that my father built me my flower press for a birthday present last year, and I feel a bit cheeky that I might have to ask him to build me another one. Um, I'm at capacity, and there's more things that I'd like to press. So, yeah, I might have to ask him to build me another one for my birthday this year. I think he would do it, so I'll have to float the idea and see how it goes.
I mean, and then you'll get something that you like. So I think that sounds like a win-win.
So, what are you most looking forward to? Obviously, spring is just a little way off for you guys because your weather is a little bit colder than it is here. So, what are you looking forward to this gardening season? What is there anything that you're particularly looking forward to? Obviously, at the moment you're mulching. I heard you talking about that on your channel recently. So, you got your high octane. Is it? cow manure, or is it horse manure based?
It is cow manure. They actually call it, depending on where you buy it from, they call this brand Moodoo.
Yep.
And so it's well aged cow manure. Generally, there are very few weeds in it, which I really appreciate. Just we've had stuff in the past that pops up, who knows what in it, and so that just increases all the work that we have to do.
Well, of course,
But our raised beds, go ahead.
of course, cows have four stomachs, so it should be, as long as it's being stored and covered before it's But yeah, by the time it's passed through the cow, it should be pretty well sterile. So that's a good. It's good for not having a lot of weed seed in it.
Right. And I think that's a lot of the issue with some of the other stuff that we've tried is just the way that it's stored. Stuff will drift into it and blow into it, and then it just gets mixed into wherever wherever they're keeping it. But our raised beds had settled over the last couple of years, just the soil had compacted. So it was nice to get a good few inches on top of it and mix that in a little bit. And it also looks a lot better than it did a couple of weeks ago.
So
So
I,
I'm excited to get more blooms coming at us, hopefully in the next, 6 weeks, 8 weeks.
Yeah, so I always say that laying mulch in and top dressing it is like laying out a new carpet. Everything looks unbelievably smart and clean and tidy. You've got your pruning done, and yeah, you get your mulch down, and then all of a sudden everything just looks really ready to. It's got loads of potential. It's all ready to go.
No, exactly. I mean, it looks stunning. If we had any plants in bloom, it'd be the perfect time to have people over, but it's a little cold, a little wet for that. But, it'll last for a little bit, so it'll still look good.
So obviously you're gardening in raised beds, with roses that are obviously quite heavy feeders. You've added your Mudu. Will you supplement feed through the growing season, or are you relying exclusively on your mulch?
Generally, we rely on the mulch. I found a humic acid product that worked. I tried it last year and it worked pretty well. The roses seem to be a little bit happier than they were the year before. So I might continue adding that. It's extremely light. You just put on a little every couple weeks. It's organic, it's safe, it's natural. I don't spray anything in my garden, so I do tend to have a bit more black spot than some of the more vigorous sprayers in our area, but I'm happy to tolerate it. So
It's really
I
not.
tend to let just
It's
nature do whatever it's going to do.
it's really nice to hear, because I'm again, I don't want to make a sweeping a statement, because everybody is different, but I have found that through contact with a lawful lot of American rose growers and enthusiasts, that you're about 15 years behind the curve here in the UK, where we discovered organic gardening and just allowing everything to find its natural balance and just deal with a few of the pest and disease problems you may encounter in the with the plus side of that everything is in balance and you have a much healthier ecosystem around you. So it's nice that you've made that move and you've made the because it's quite abnormal for an American gardener to be completely organic. So I'm really pleased to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, roses just had such a massive reputation for being fussy and for being so prone to disease, which was true for a while, but they've done so much with breeding programs, and then also we've got master gardener programs through a lot of the agricultural extension universities, and they've done a fantastic job of putting out information for how to grow things on a more, I won't say natural basis because we're doing a lot of work on it, but without the use of harmful chemicals. And then where I live, next to so many different waterways, there's a phrase of if it hits the ground, it hits the sound. So a nice little rhyming reminder for anything that you put in your soil is going to then go into the water table and go into these bodies of water. And we get these massive algae blooms every year. I'm also a scuba diver, and our visibility in the summer is absolutely horrible because we just get these massive algae blooms from all the nitrogen that's being put in
There's a
from
runoff.
chemical fertilizers and from all of the other runoff.
And of course, it's twofold as well. People forget that, it's not just the environmental factor of not using the chemical itself physically in the garden or in agriculture, but the chemical actually takes such a huge amount of energy, normally fossil fuel based, and more importantly, water, and the processing of water to actually produce in the first place. So it's the behind the scenes saving as well that you can make by just coming away from a chemical and reaching for a different product. It's really funny that. I mean, today, obviously, I said that we've had one of the coldest starts here on the south coast for of the winter so far with a -3. However, the hellebores that I picked today, that not far from home, they were only about 15 kilometers from home. This site I harvest those for today. They had green fly on one particular plant. You think, well, goodness me, it's -3 overnight, but we've got our first populations of aphid, greenfly, blackfly already starting in the season. And a lot of people would reach for the spray with those. But if you leave them, the ladybirds are just waking up, and the ladybirds need something to eat. So the ladybirds will be eaten or will eat the aphids, and the whole world goes round and round in harmony if we just let it.
Right. I mean, things have just started waking up around us. We have a designated green space behind us where things can't be built. And all of the birds have started making a lot more noise in the last couple of weeks. The frogs have been active all night. We've had to shut our windows because it just keeps us up. So it's
You're
great
being,
to hear,
but
maybe not in the middle of the night, but I'm happy to know it's all coming back soon.
you're being kept awake by flirty frogs, I think, is there?
Exactly. They're looking for friends.
What type of frogs are these? Are these fairly large frogs? Because here in the UK, a froggy, well, a large frog or a toad. I don't know if you have toads in America, but they'll be maximum of about sort of no 6 or 7 centimeters, 8 centimeters across. But you guys have much larger ones, don't you?
We can. The ones that are around where we are could probably fit on the pad of my thumb. They're
Oh,
really
so they're
small,
tiny,
little green
tiny.
and brown, little bitty things, but you wouldn't know it from the sound they make.
I'm assuming they must be quite high up in the trees and things. Are they these sort of a tree frog or the ground frog?
Ground frogs.
Okay.
It's a very wet forested space behind us, so they're just all in the mud and the muck under everything down there. We just saw our first salamander this morning that was probably the size of my hand, but there's a stream behind our house that they like to live in and come explore from.
Okay, so one of the standard questions I'm asking absolutely everybody that comes onto the podcast, and I've had to rephrase this because my husband Mark made me rephrase it because he said it was a bit brutal. That if you had to leave, you've obviously lived in your property that you're in with your husband at the moment for quite some time. You've built yourself a beautiful garden and a beautiful space for entertaining outside. If you had to leave that property and you could never return and you could only take one rose with you from your collection, which rose would it be?
So we have this little climbing miniature that I've got in a pot that is not big enough for it, but it's nice because it keeps it a little bit tamer than it would be otherwise. But it's called Rosanna, and I got it from a friend who I met on Instagram years ago. I mean, I love the Instagram gardening community. They're all so nice. And he sent us a rooted cutting of it, and then he died a couple of years back. So I would probably save that one because all of the other ones we could easily replace. We've got friends who could do cuttings or they're still in commerce. But this
Yeah.
one I haven't seen anywhere else, and it's just a beautiful little dark pink thing.
So that one has sentimental value and reminds you of a dear friend. I'm always really humbled by the effort that people are actually prepared to make when they don't really know you on the internet, and all sorts of things are, I must confess that all sorts of things arrive here at the house, and I have no idea where they come from. I have to find out who sent them, and I'm always astonished just by how generous people are. Not, I mean, not so much with their money because some of these things aren't particularly expensive, but just the fact they've packaged it up, they've thought about me and gone to the post office and sent it off. And I just think it's so lovely the online community you can actually reach.
Right. I mean, that just the time and effort of it means something.
Yeah.
Whereas, there are people that you see every day that you just end up taking it for granted, and it's really easy to do.
So you mentioned that at one of your rose auctions there's going to be maybe a couple of roses that catch your attention. Is there any roses that are maybe newly released over there in the States that you've got your eye on adding to your collection that might sort of turn your head and maybe tempt you?
There, I don't necessarily do well with new releases. I let other people try them out and just see what they have to say about it because I love all the ones that I have in my garden and I'm happy with the setup that I have there. So if I'm gonna pull something out and replace it with something, it's got to be something that's worthwhile. So
Yeah.
I like finding a lot of the older, more retired ones that people who are more established in their gardens, who are maybe downsizing or just looking for a refresh for a certain area are doing. That tends to be my way of doing things, at least.
But I'm being sort of tormented by obviously now that my YouTube channel has grown to the point it has done and racked up 3 million views with the rose reviews that I produced. Obviously, a lot of people say, "Well, have you got a rose review on this? Have you got a review on that?" And I'm being tormented and sort of really well tormented by roses like Evelyn by David Austin Roses, which is no longer available here in the UK, and I have turned over every stone in the UK and in Europe looking for this rose because I literally get maybe half a dozen messages about this rose every single week saying, "Oh, where is your review for this one? Where is your review, for instance, for Jude the Obscure, which is now also retired here in the UK?" And I was like, "Well, I had it, and I don't have it anymore, but I had it, and I didn't review it because I then replaced it with something, and now I'm kicking myself, and I can't get hold of, for instance." Evelyn, I mean, I say it's driving me nuts. I mean, I found somewhere in Germany that could ship it, and then I couldn't get it, and oh God, yeah, it's a problem. And I thought, well, I'll reach out directly to David Austin. Maybe they will be able to send me into to a supply that, yeah, but they were very cagey about it, and I didn't get very far. The door was closed with that, so I'll have to go back to the drawing board with that one.
I know they're a little strict in the US for stuff that's still in commercial availability, but maybe depending on what the plant patent rules are, you could get a rooted cutting from someone who's got an established bush and it'll take a couple of years, but that
Well,
that could come up and be in good shape.
I'm gonna do my best to smooth Brad from Select Roses. I'm speaking to him at the weekend. I know he had some stock, so I'm gonna sort of flutter my eyelashes and put on my best English accent and see whether I can charm him into maybe letting me have one of his.
See, there you go. And I mean, you do so much work on the reviews and they're so good, so many people see them. If there's enough demand for it, maybe they'll bring it back.
No, that's that. The David Austin are very very disciplined with that. No, that is not happening.
Yeah, they're like Disney with the vaults back in the day.
Yes, a little bit. So yeah, I mean, I was talking to Liam from David Austin Roses before Christmas, and I actually attended a course up at the David Austin Nursery, and they were talking to the delegates about the breeding program and how they produce 40,000 crosses every year, and then about 150 of those make it out a year into the growing field, and they're basically planted as seedlings and see how they perform. And it's a little bit of a suck it and see. They either survive or they don't. They're not really watered, they're not fed, they're not pruned, to see how resilient and how strong they are. And then about once a year, the field is walked, and anything that is particularly exceptional gets pulled to one side, and they take 150 and they cut it down to about 15, and it slowly but surely over a period of years ends up at just one or two varieties from each 40,000 batch. And I said to Liam, I said, what happens to the, obviously you planted out 150 in the first place, what happens to the, say, 140 that don't make it? And he said, oh, well, they're just pulled up and burnt. And I thought, oh my goodness, there must be so many amazing varieties there that just on one day didn't show particularly well, that actually would make amazing varieties, but they literally pull them up and chuck them on the bonfire to get rid of them, and then have to move on to the next batches. So yeah, they're very disciplined with that.
And at that scale, they have to be. But it makes me grateful for people like the Rose Dude who are doing backyard hybridizing. I've got a couple of things that were hybridized by local growers just in their own backyard, small scale commercial, and they're absolutely beautiful. I have, I think it's a mini flora, it may be a miniature called Lynn. That's just this beautiful purple color that was bred by a local guy, and it's one of my favorites back there.
Really? Oh, of course, that color is very difficult to get in the first place, isn't it? It's not a color that happens an awful lot. So obviously they knew what they were doing when they crossed it.
He's got a lot of good experience. He and his wife before she passed away put out a lot of great miniatures and mini floras. So if I can find something of theirs that's available, I will always find a place for that. But
You'll be off.
it's got
You'll
to
be
be
off.
special to pull me in.
You'll be off to the DIY store to purchase yourself another pot.
Exactly.
So, how often do you said the Rose Society's meeting about once a month? What's the next event that you've got coming up? Because you've recently all got together as a group and you went off and you pruned the amenity garden or the municipal garden that you said about. So, what's the next event that you guys are going to be attending and talking about?
Yeah, so March 1st, we did the municipal garden pruning that we do every year, and we had about 40 people come out for that for 3 hours. So got a ton of work done, which was fantastic. We have a Rose Society meeting, I think it's the third Thursday of this month.
Hmm.
Maybe it's the fourth. No, it's the third Thursday of this month. So that'll be a meeting where we just get together on a Thursday evening. We'll have a presentation for about an hour or so. We'll have snacks. We'll have time for people to chat. And then that Saturday is going to be our annual rose sale. It's it's a come as you are. Things are priced by the item. You can find things at a fantastic deal: pots, garden supplies, plants, roses, all that good stuff. And that is our fundraiser for the municipal garden because we actually purchase new roses each year to replace things that maybe aren't in commercial availability anymore. And so we want it to be something that people can see and can take notes and then maybe go and find the roses that they see in the garden to bring to their own home.
Hmm.
And that garden, those 1,500 plus roses are also a no spray garden. So people can see how they grow in the area without any added spraying regimen, just pruning once a week or deadheading once a week. So that is our fundraiser for that every year. And then April and May we'll just have one meeting each month. May we'll have a chat about the upcoming Rose Show, and then come June is our annual Rose Show, and then a few other Rose shows in the area.
Fantastic, brilliant. So you've got a busy couple of months ahead of you as you head towards the beginning part of the season.
It gets really sleepy over the end of the year, and then it picks up really quickly, and then is full tilt by summer when we're pruning every week.
Well, I always say that one of the biggest problems with gardening here in the UK is our climate is so temperate during the winter that actually things continue to grow and continue to move. And actually, because the weather is there's not snow on the ground and there's not ice on the ground, that actually I continue to work pretty much all year round. So I've been working on a new area in the garden. I've been actually when I finish talking to you in about the next 10-15 minutes, I should be heading out and I've got 2 tons of soil conditioner on the back of my work wagon that I've got to shovel off the back so I can start work tomorrow with an empty truck again. But yeah, I've pulled out a big laurel hedge over the weekend. It was a bit bigger than I thought it was going to be, so I had to get a digger. A gentleman came by called Henry with a digger and pulled out the stumps, and then I had to get rid of those this morning. I took those off for commercial recycling, so I'm off to do exactly what you did over the weekend. I'm off to shovel compost and mulch so I can get this area ready for planting because this area is actually housing last year's roses that I reviewed because I'm so sentimental. If a rose really catches my attention, and we're getting down to really good ones now. I think last year I reviewed, I can't remember, I should know, but I can't remember. There is at least 25 roses that I wanted to keep from last year's reviews that I didn't have anywhere to put, so they've been healed in large buckets of compost just for a couple of months to hold them, and then I've had to dig up a fairly large chunk of the garden that was untouched to actually house them, and then say between 50, 60 roses in the ground already. I won't be growing any veg this year, unfortunately. I'm not growing fruit and veg because there's no room. It's all roses.
No, sometimes I think it would be nice to have just a little bit more space, but then I know I would be doing the exact same thing and adding just a little bit more, and so I need a little bit more room. If nothing else, I might try to talk to one of my neighbors and see if I can just take over a little corner of their backyard and grow a few more bushes.
I always I always say that gardens should have elasticated wastes that you can sort of let them out a little bit, and then if you need to, and you just pull them back in a little bit.
Right, everything comes in waves.
So yeah, I've hit the parameters of of our garden now. There is no more space, so I can't squeeze any more in. So we're at the finite point. So we're going to have to move because I've run out of space. There's no more.
It's the only logical thing to do, and then you can start fresh and do everything new.
I must be crazy to even consider it, but yes.
You have to do something to keep you busy. It keeps you young.
I don't know if he does that. I'm feeling every single part of my age, I must admit. Right.
Well,
I'm very, very grateful for you for joining me today. I hope that you go back to your the Tacoma Rose Society when you meet in about 3 weeks' time, and my ears are burning as you talk about the conversation that we've had today. Thank you so much for Justin for telling us all about the society and what it is you get up to, and talking us to about your lovely garden. Thanks very much for giving up your time and joining me on the podcast. I'll talk to you again very soon.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for all that you put out there.
It's an absolute pleasure. Well, I say it's an absolute pleasure, but you asked me that question in mid-June, um, when my husband Mark is saying, literally, why are you still outside at 8 o'clock at night? And I am, because a review for me it probably takes me about 2 hours to put together to film something that's about 10 minutes in one continuous film. In what it takes me about 2 hours to do. I mean, I have to not only photograph the rows dozens of times, but also then the little video clips that make up the reels and the shorts that I do. I mean, each one I aim to have about 100 video clips of about 4 or 5 seconds. It adds up. It's quite a lot.
There is a reason that I love the 90-second limit on Instagram for a reel that you can just record in app, because otherwise it would be way more work than I'm willing to put in or know how to do.
Well, I have 200 albums on my phone, each one collected. I think my video library is about 44,000 videos and clips now of the collection. So it's got a little bit out of hand. It takes up a terabyte on my phone. Yeah, it's got a bit much.
Good for you. That is impressive.
I'm just going to lean into it, I think. Anyway, I'm rambling again. Thank you so much for your time. I will talk to you very, very soon, and say I'll look forward to your updates about what you're doing with the Rose Society, and of course, seeing your garden wake up over the next few weeks.
Sounds good. Chat
All right.
soon.
Take care. Bye bye now. I want to thank Justin personally for his time and sharing the story not only behind his personal account but also the one for the Tacoma Rose Society. To say that I'm very jealous of the community spirit and sense of belonging that they all have in America with the Rose Societies they attend is an understatement. Here in the UK, finding a community group or a society to share your passion with is a little bit difficult, and sometimes the horticultural professions over here can feel just a little bit stuffy and sometimes a little bit heavyweight. So I'm really glad they have a sense of community where they can get together regularly, share their passions and information with each other. Next week, we're staying on that side of the Atlantic again, and I have the absolute pleasure in talking to Brad from Select Roses. Brad, like me, is a massive rose enthusiast. He owns a nursery supplying roses to the public in British Columbia. He is also a rose breeder and hybridizer. We have a great chat about roses, sweet peas and even onions, and his beautiful poodle Jedi, who has a real problem with the very large eagles that visit the nursery on a regular basis. Here in the UK, I'm heading out into the garden to continue to build plant supports. Many of you will have seen on social media, I'm a terrible upcycler and can never bear to throw things away. The barrel I had to save the other day that was no longer holding water as a water butt and turned into a half wooden barrel planter, I couldn't bear to throw the straps away. So I've come up with an idea of using them in the garden to actually support some really tall herbaceous perennials. Catch media for that over on Instagram, TikTok or YouTube. Until next week, happy gardening.